It was a Tuesday night. One of those unremarkable evenings where everything's supposed to feel stable. I'd just gotten home from work, tie half undone, the house smelling faintly like the lemon candle Livy liked to light in the evenings. Nothing was out of place, at least not physically. But something in the air felt off. Thicker. Heavier. She was standing in the bedroom doorway when it happened. Hair tucked behind one ear, arms crossed in that way she did when she wasn't just upset, she was preparing a case. Surgical. Like she had rehearsed this. You went without asking. That's not okay. 7 words. That's all. But they hit like a slap across the face. I remember blinking at her, not even sure I heard her right. Wait, what? That trip, she said, stepping further into the room. You said yes without talking to me. I paused, still holding my shirt in one hand, bare feet on the hardwood floor. It's a weekend, Livy. Just 2 nights with the guys. I didn't think it was a big deal. And here's the thing. It hadn't been a big deal before. We'd always had this unspoken understanding. We each had lives outside of each other. Friends, hobbies. If something came up, we communicated out of courtesy, not requirement. That was our rhythm. Or at least I thought it was. But she didn't smile. Didn't soften. Her voice stayed cool even. We're in a partnership, Zach. You don't just make decisions unilaterally. Unilaterally. That word stuck in my throat like a dry pill. I looked at her, really looked, and something in her face had changed. This wasn't about a trip. This wasn't even about me being inconsiderate. This was about control. I figured I'd mention it tonight, I said, keeping my tone neutral. It's not like I'm disappearing. It's a weekend. I thought it was fine. You thought it was fine, she repeated, and there was this hint of condescension in her voice. But you didn't check with me. Do I have to? I asked, not as a challenge, but genuinely confused. Is that where we're at now? I need clearance for a weekend with my friends. Her silence answered the question before she did. I just think, she began, sitting on the edge of the bed like a therapist prepping for a session, that if you respected me and this relationship, you'd consider how your choices affect us. And you would have run it by me. It was like listening to someone read from a script. And not one they wrote either, one they downloaded. Like she'd been absorbing some kind of relationship content that reframed every action I took as either a validation of her control or an act of war. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. She wasn't just disappointed I made a decision without her. She was offended that I didn't default to her authority. I'm not a child, Livy, I said quietly. No, she replied just as calmly. You're a man who apparently doesn't take his relationship seriously. I just stared at her for a second, and something inside me, something small, something I hadn't heard in years, whispered, this isn't right. And it wasn't. Because here's the part one can admit now, this wasn't the first time I'd felt that creeping sense of unease. That realization that I was being slowly rewritten, one small compromise at a time. But that night was different. That night was a shift. Because it wasn't framed as a request. It wasn't a conversation. It was an ultimatum, quiet, subtle, but still an ultimatum. Do what I want, or face the consequences. So I canceled the trip. She didn't say thank you. She didn't seem relieved or appreciative. She just nodded like a queen who'd had her decree obeyed. Like my agreement was a form of obedience, not connection. She didn't even ask why I changed my mind. That night, I didn't sleep next to her. Not because she kicked me out. Not because we fought. But because the idea of lying beside someone who had so clearly reframed our love into a transaction, that was unbearable. I grabbed a blanket, made my way to the living room, and collapsed on the couch. And as I lay there in the dark, the ceiling fan above casting slow-moving shadows on the wall, it hit me. I hadn't lost myself all at once. I'd been giving myself away in small pieces, slowly, invisibly. And the scary part? I hadn't even noticed. 5 years. That's how long we'd been together. We met at an art show downtown. She was with a friend of a friend, and I was showcasing some of my design work. She was magnetic that night, curious and confident, and just this force of energy I couldn't pull away from. She asked questions like she really cared about the answers. And I guess I mistook that intensity for love, instead of the need to eventually mold. At first, it felt good, like I'd found someone who brought structure to my scattered world. She was organized, deliberate, always planning something. And I let her take the lead on things because, honestly, it made life easier. Dinners, bills, vacations, house stuff. She handled the logistics and I handled the creative. We called it balance. But little by little, things started to feel off. I stopped seeing certain friends. Not because she told me not to, but because it became exhausting to deal with her reactions afterward. The way she'd go quiet. The way she'd ask leading questions like, "Do you even enjoy spending time with them?" Or worse, "I just thought we were past that phase." Past what? Having a life? I didn't notice at the time. I thought we were evolving, growing up, focusing on us. But now I could see it. I had been shrinking to make the relationship feel bigger. Giving up tiny parts of myself to keep the peace, one silent retreat at a time. And somehow, in all that, I'd convinced myself it was love. So when she gave me that line, "You didn't ask me," I didn't just hear a comment about a trip. I heard 5 years of quiet correction. Of emotional training. Of being shaped. I stared up at the ceiling and realized something terrifying. I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a decision that was just mine. Not a shared one, not a compromise, not a calculation. Just mine. I didn't sleep much that night. The couch was uncomfortable, but not as uncomfortable as the truth. And I knew, deep down, in a way I couldn't unfeel, that the ground beneath us had shifted. Not because of a trip. Because I finally saw the strings. I didn't go into work the next day. I told my boss I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a total lie. My body was fine. That was a mess. I spent most of the morning just sitting on the edge of the couch, staring at the cold cup of coffee I'd made and never touched. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, just tense. Like it was holding its breath right along with me. Livy had already left by the time I got up. No note, no check-in. Just gone. And weirdly I was grateful. I needed space, not more conversations that felt like performance reviews. I kept trying to tell myself it was a small thing. One trip. One disagreement. Not a sign of something deeper. But my gut wasn't buying it. My mind kept looping back to moments that didn't feel like much at the time. Small flashbacks that had once passed for normal couple stuff, but now seemed like warnings I hadn't been smart enough to catch. Like the time I bought a new jacket without asking her opinion first. I liked it, this olive green thing with leather elbows, vintage but clean. I came home wearing it, proud of the find, and she didn't say anything at first. Just looked me up and down, then muttered, "Kind of bold for you." That night, she didn't touch me once. Not a hug. Not even a brush of fingers on the couch. Or the weekend I skipped her cousin's engagement party because I had a freelance deadline. She didn't fight me on it. Didn't even raise her voice. Just came home afterward and slept in the guest room without a word. For 3 nights. Every time I asked what was wrong, she'd just say, "Nothing. You do you." Passive punishment. Looking back, I realized how often my choices were met not with conversation, but consequence. And slowly, God, so slowly I didn't even notice, I'd started modifying myself. Not because she asked. Because she didn't have to. That's the part that stung the most. I'd been trained. When did that happen? When did the man I used to be, spontaneous, confident, kind of a mess but always my own mess, start second-guessing everything? When did I stop making decisions and start making calculations? I looked around the living room. Everything in there was us. The framed pictures on the wall, the throw pillows in colors I didn't pick, the books I never read but displayed because they made us look cultured. Even the damn coffee table was something she found online after I'd suggested a beat-up vintage one from a flea market. She'd called mine, too grungy for the vibe. The vibe? What the hell even was our vibe? I used to design furniture. Small stuff, minimalist pieces with clean lines and weird angles. There was a time I'd stay up past midnight sketching ideas on the back of receipts and paper napkins. Livy used to say she loved that about me, that I got inspired by the random stuff most people ignored. But at some point she started making little comments. Could you maybe not leave your sketches all over the table? I know it's your process, but this place is starting to look like a teenager's art room. Maybe wait till we have a bigger place before you dive back into all that again. So I stopped, packed my tools into storage bins, and told myself I'd get back to it eventually. That was over a year ago. And now here I was, sitting in the home I helped pay for, in the life I helped build, suddenly wondering how much of it was actually mine. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos. Us at Tybee Beach, her wearing my hoodie and making a face at the camera. Me at my friend Jules's birthday, one of the last ones I went to before Livy started calling Jules a bad influence. A selfie from a camping trip I barely remembered agreeing to skip because Livy didn't like unstructured weekends. Then there were fewer pictures of me. More of her. Posed, edited, curated. If I was in them, I was in the background. Or cropped to just a shoulder and smile. I didn't know when I became a prop in my own relationship. Around noon, I got a text from her. Hope you're feeling better. Let me know if you want soup later. Soup. Like everything was fine. Like we hadn't crossed some invisible line the night before. I didn't reply. Instead, I went into the garage, found the old plastic bin where I'd stashed my design stuff, and opened it like I was cracking a tomb. Inside were my old sketch pads, rulers, paint markers, a few loose bolts and ideas I hadn't touched in months. I sat on the cold concrete floor, flipping through pages of forgotten designs, some brilliant, some terrible, all mine. And I realized then that it wasn't just that she'd taken space in my life. It was that I'd vacated it for her. Willingly. Slowly. And now that I wanted some of it back, she was guarding it like territory. It's a wild thing, waking up inside your own life and realizing you don't recognize it. That you traded authenticity for acceptance. That the person who said they loved you never really loved you, just the version they could sculpt. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't text her back. I just sat in the garage with a pencil in my hand and silence in my ears. It was the first time in a long time I felt even a little like myself again. And something in me, something quiet but stubborn, decided it wasn't going back to sleep. Livy came home that evening like nothing had happened. She walked through the door with her usual, "Hey babe," kissed my cheek like it hadn't cooled overnight, and headed straight for the kitchen. I watched her from the couch, not saying much. Just observing. Something about her demeanor made my skin crawl. Not because she was cheerful, but because it was so normal. Like she thought it was handled. Like I'd processed my little tantrum and fallen back in line. She cooked her favorite soup, lentil, the kind I always found bland but pretended to like. I guess somewhere along the way I stopped mentioning I didn't. At dinner, she filled the space with small talk. Updates from work. Something about her friend Allie's bridal shower. A passive-aggressive quip about how I could have told her sooner if I wasn't feeling well. I just nodded and chewed. Said, "That's nice," at the right moments. But my mind was somewhere else. Because now I saw it clearly. This wasn't reconciliation. This was cleanup. She thought I had caved. That me canceling the trip meant I understood the rules again. That the power dynamic had been re-established. She mistook my silence for surrender. And I realized something that made me sick to my stomach. She didn't care how I felt. She cared that she had won. After dinner, she curled up next to me on the couch like she always did. Her head on my shoulder. Her fingers laced into mine like we were one of those happy couples from a toothpaste commercial. And I played along. Not because I forgave her, but because I needed time. I needed to watch. The next morning, I started looking backward, something I'd been avoiding for years. Not at the highlights, but the in-betweens. The tension in the car rides. The apologies I made just to end arguments I didn't start. The friendships that slowly disappeared under the weight of her disapproval. There was Ethan, my old college roommate and one of my closest friends. We used to hang out every other weekend. Then Livy started referring to him as immature. Said he was a bad influence, always dragging me into frat boy nonsense. I laughed it off at first, but I stopped returning Ethan's texts eventually. The last time I saw him was almost 2 years ago. He invited me to his engagement party. I made an excuse about work and never showed. There was Jules, too, the friend Livy called exhausting. Jules had this wild, creative energy. She encouraged me to chase my ideas, to stop apologizing for having a loud brain. Livy said Jules thrived on chaos. Said she made me forget my priorities. Eventually, I stopped inviting Jules over. She stopped asking why. It wasn't always direct. Livy didn't forbid things. She didn't need to. She'd just withdraw. Quiet disapproval. I get a look, a sigh. A full day of silence if I pushed back too hard. And over time, I adjusted. We call it compromise when it happens slowly. When we don't feel the corners being shaved off one by one. But when you lay it all out, it looks like something else. It looks like surrender. So that day, I found Ethan's number and texted him. I just said, "Hey man, I owe you a conversation. You free sometime this week?" His reply came 5 minutes later. Zach, holy shit. Yeah, name the place. I met him at this dive bar we used to go to, a dusty little place with darts and terrible lighting. The kind of bar that didn't care if you were wearing the same jeans 3 days in a row. I almost canceled last minute, half out of guilt, half out of shame. But I went. When I walked in, Ethan stood up like he couldn't believe I was real. We hugged. He didn't say much at first. Just bought us both beers and waited. Eventually, I told him everything. Not just about the trip. About the years. The patterns. The feeling that I was living someone else's life in my own body. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't gloat. He just nodded, then leaned back in his chair and said something that stuck in my chest like a nail. "I knew you were gone, man. But I didn't realize how far." And that's when it hit me. Livy hadn't just isolated me from people who challenged her control. She'd edited my support system. Removed the mirrors that showed me who I used to be. By the time I got home that night, Livy was already in bed. I stood in the doorway for a long time just watching her sleep. Her breathing was calm. Peaceful. As if nothing was off. I knew then that I wasn't going to leave immediately. I wasn't ready. But I wasn't going to play the part anymore either. No more pretending her approval was oxygen. No more shaving myself down just to fit in her hands. Something had cracked open inside me. And for the first time in a long time, I wanted out. Not out of the house. Not even the relationship, not yet. I just wanted out of her grip. And that was the beginning. I didn't come out swinging. That wasn't my style, not yet. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted space. Breathing room. And I didn't ask for it. I just started taking it. Little things at first. I reactivated an old checking account that I'd left dormant after Livy convinced me it was simpler to have everything joint. I didn't drain our shared one or make a scene. I just moved a small amount over. Enough to remind myself that not every dollar I made had to pass through her filters. I also started sketching again. Not in secret, but not exactly in the open either. I'd sit in the garage with the door halfway up, headphones in, pencil in hand, pretending like I was too busy to hear her calling. There was something satisfying about that silence. She didn't like it. I could feel it from the way her tone shifted when she called for me a second time, just a notch colder, tighter. Then there was the design competition. An old mentor had forwarded me the invite months ago, a regional showcase in Austin for up-and-coming furniture designers. I'd written it off at the time, knowing Livy would have called it irresponsible to spend the money on a trip with no guaranteed return. But now, I signed up, didn't even tell her, booked the flight, sent in my submission, and started building the prototype in the garage. Every time I made a move like that, I waited to see what would happen. And like clockwork, it came, the emotional fireworks. It wasn't yelling. That wasn't her way. Livy's arsenal was sharper than that. She weaponized the atmosphere. If she couldn't control what I was doing, she'd control how it felt to do it. The first night I skipped our usual Netflix routine to keep sketching. She left a plate of dinner on the counter and went to bed without saying goodnight. The second time, she forgot to pick up my dry cleaning, something she'd offered to do. When I reminded her, she smiled and said, "Sorry, guess I just assumed you'd start handling your own stuff again." That one stung, because I had become reliant on her in small ways. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Then came the affection games. Or more accurately, the lack of them. Physical touch vanished. No goodnight kisses, no casual brushing of fingers, no leaning into me on the couch. Just space. A calculated drought. I don't think I realized how deeply she had conditioned me to crave that kind of contact until it disappeared. It used to feel like love. Now it felt like currency I had to earn back. But here's the weird part. I didn't miss it the way I thought I would. Not after the first couple days. Because without the reward, I started to notice how much of my behavior had been shaped by trying not to lose it. The approval, the sweetness, the warmth, all of it had strings attached. Say the right thing. Skip the trip. Let her win the argument. Smile during dinner with her boss. Pretend like her friend Emily isn't awful. Then you can have your little reward. And when I stopped chasing it, she panicked. Not outwardly. But I could feel it. She started overcompensating in other areas. Baking more. Asking about my day with fake cheerfulness. Wearing the perfume she used to wear when we first got together, the one I once told her made me feel like I was falling in love. That was the tell. She didn't bring that perfume out unless she was trying to reset the narrative. But I didn't bite. Instead, I reconnected with old pieces of myself. Took the bike out one Saturday and went dirt riding with a couple guys from the shop I used to hang out at. The place was still there, still dusty, still loud, still full of oil and gravel and jokes that would make Livy's skin crawl. I didn't tell her where I was going. I just left a note that said, "Gone riding," and locked the door behind me. When I came home that night, she was sitting at the table, a glass of wine half full, arms crossed. "You didn't say you were leaving." "Didn't think I needed permission," I said, hanging my keys on the hook. She didn't say anything at first. Just stared. Then, without missing a beat, she said, "You're pulling away." I met her gaze, steady and calm. "Maybe." It was the first honest answer I'd given her in months. She stood up slowly. "But what's happening to us?" And in that moment, I realized she truly didn't see it. She thought the problem was me drifting. Not her control. Not the years of slow erosion. She couldn't see past the fact that I was no longer playing the role she cast for me. "I'm just remembering who I am," I said. "That's all." Her eyes flickered. She didn't like that answer. That night, she didn't come to bed. Slept in the guest room, door closed. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Like the argument had been absorbed into the drywall, another crack painted over. But I was done painting. I was still here, still playing house. But inside, I'd already started moving out. A week after that last blow-up, if you could even call it that, things started to shift. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Livy was too smart for that. No, she pivoted. One night I came home from work and the lights were dimmed. Soft music playing. Candles lit. She was in the kitchen, barefoot in a flowy dress she used to wear on our early date nights. There was dinner on the stove, actual dinner, not just whatever she could throw together between work calls. Wine glasses out. Real silverware. The whole performance. She turned, smiling like nothing had happened. "Thought I'd cook for us tonight. We've both been a little stressed lately." I stood there for a second just taking it in. The warmth, the welcome, the sudden softness. It was a lot. I knew what this was. It wasn't affection. It was bait. She was trying to pull me back in with nostalgia, with the image of the woman I'd fallen for. The timing wasn't random. She'd seen the distance growing and decided to close it fast, on her terms. We ate dinner together like a couple in a commercial. She laughed at my old stories. Touched my arm when she talked. Asked about my sketches again. Even said she was proud of me for getting back into it. Proud. As if I'd just gotten through a rough patch and was ready to rejoin the team. Like my mini rebellion was a phase and we could both move on now. Me grateful for her forgiveness, her back in the role of architect. But I didn't play along. When she reached across the table and said, "I've missed this version of us," I set my fork down. "Livy, we need to talk." The smile on her face stiffened just a hair. "We are talking." "No," I said. "I mean really talk. About what's been going on." Her eyes narrowed just a little, but the smile stayed. "Zach, can't we just enjoy tonight? Why ruin it?" "Because this isn't real," I said, voice calm. "This is makeup without the fight. It's cleanup without the mess." For a second, I thought she'd drop the act. But she didn't. She leaned back, still smiling, but there was steel in her eyes now. "You've changed," she said flatly. "You used to let things go. You used to be more." She hesitated, searching for the word, balanced. Balanced. I almost laughed. Like the word balanced meant what she thought it did, like it wasn't just code for obedient. "I used to be quiet," I said. "That's not balance." She stood abruptly, gathering the plates like we were done, with dinner, with the conversation, with the whole inconvenient subject. "You're just stressed," she muttered. "Maybe it's the garage or those old friends you keep digging up." There was the pivot again. Dismiss, redirect, minimize. "I'm not stressed," I said, standing too. "I'm aware. There's a difference." She didn't respond. Just rinsed off the dishes with sharp, methodical movements and disappeared into the bedroom before I could say anything else. I sat on the couch that night, staring at the blank TV screen, feeling the weight of it all finally settle in. Not the sadness that had passed. This was something else. Clarity. I could see her patterns now, not just the actions, but the motives. And that made them powerless. Before, when she pulled away emotionally, I panicked. Tried harder. Bent further. Now, when she went cold, I felt nothing. Just confirmation. Without the affection, without the reward, there was nothing left holding the illusion together. Just two people sharing a house, eating polite dinners, and pretending they were on the same team. She wasn't a monster. I didn't hate her. But I saw her clearly now. She loved control more than she loved me. And I loved peace more than I loved the idea of staying. It was the calm before the storm, and I knew it. This wasn't going to end quietly. Not when she realized the tools she'd always relied on no longer worked. Not when she figured out that the version of me she'd shaped was gone, and I wasn't coming back. The real me was waking up. And I was just getting started. The email came on a Wednesday. Subject line, Creative Residency Invitation, Denver. I opened it twice before it sank in. 6 months, paid, housing included, total creative freedom. A dream I'd shelved long ago. I didn't tell Livy right away. I needed time to sit with the idea of saying yes to something without asking permission. That night over dinner, I floated it gently, like it was just a thought. Her eyes flicked up. "Denver?" she said with a practiced smile. "That's far." She tried to sound supportive, but her questions were strategic. "What about the house? Would I come? Would you really leave everything behind?" When I told her I was seriously considering it, her face cracked. Just slightly. It wasn't about the job. It was about control slipping through her fingers. She unraveled fast after that. The smiles faded. She accused me of being selfish. Of running. She cried. Yelled. Threatened to leave if I did. But I stayed calm. I told her, "I'm not asking. I'm telling you." That night I booked a hotel and started packing a suitcase. She followed me room to room, sobbing. Begging. Promising to change, to go to therapy, to do the work. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just said, "You need help, Livy. But I can't be your hostage while you figure that out." Her grip on my wrist lingered for a second before I peeled it off. I walked out the door, the weight of my bag nothing compared to the weight I was finally dropping for good. Denver didn't fix everything, but it gave me oxygen. My apartment was small but sunlit, with views of the hills and silence that didn't feel like punishment. The job stretched me in the best ways, creatively, emotionally, humanly. I started saying yes to new people. New dinners. New mornings. I bought a used bike and rode on Sundays again. I felt like myself, not a version of me I'd filtered down to make someone else comfortable. The divorce paperwork went through quietly. She kept the furniture. I kept my name. My peace. My mind. A month later, a box arrived from Savannah. Inside, books, clothes, and one photo, our wedding day. Tucked behind it, a letter. No greeting. Just a stream of subtle blame. "You'll regret this one day," she wrote. "Maybe when you come to your senses, I'll be open to forgiveness." I stared at it for a moment, not out of sadness, but disbelief. Even now, she thought she had the upper hand. I ripped the photo in half, then in quarters, then flushed it piece by piece. Not out of anger. Just cleansing. I hadn't lost a marriage. I'd reclaimed a life. Over dinner with friends, real ones chosen by me, I caught myself smiling at nothing. One of them asked if I was okay. Yeah, I said and meant it. I finally understood that real intimacy doesn't need to be earned by sacrificing who you are. It isn't kept through silence or walking on eggshells. It's freedom. It's space to exist and still be loved. Livy once told me, until you submit, don't even dream. But I did. I stood up. I walked out. And I never stopped walking toward myself again.